When the HOA president yanked that gun from his waistband, his hand shaking and face flushed crimson, I thought, this idiot has no idea what he's just done. My wife, Sarah, barely raised an eyebrow. 10 years in Delta Force, 7 deployments, to the world's deadliest war zones. And now, she was staring down a wannabe cop threatening her over a red door. Asterisk, you won't believe what happened next. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, because that morning, our quiet life turned into a battle we never asked for. Asterisk, we moved into Paradise Pines 3 months ago when I landed a software job in Tampa. The neighborhood looked like a dream. Peaceful streets, community pool, and just 25 minutes from MacDill Air Force Base where Sarah was stationed. The realtor warned us about an active HOA. We shrugged it off. We'd dealt with them before, mowing schedules, mailbox height, basic stuff. Then we met Richard Wellington. The day after moving in, I was unloading boxes when a tall, wiry man in his 60s approached. Pressed khakis, a polo shirt with the Paradise Pines HOA logo, and most noticeably a handgun in a belt holster. Asterisk, Michael Johnson, he said with the command of someone used to being obeyed. I'm Richard Wellington, HOA president. Here's your covenant book. Read it. We take rules seriously. Asterisk, he handed me a massive binder. When Sarah came outside, Richard's tone shifted. Mrs. Johnson, I'm former law enforcement, Paradise Pines' own security. Nice to meet you, Mr. Wellington, Sarah said evenly. Officer Wellington to most, corrected, patting the gun. Asterisk, that evening Sarah looked uneasy. His stance doesn't match his story. And that gun, poorly worn? Bet he was never in a real tactical situation. Asterisk, she was right. And he was about to go from nuisance to danger. Asterisk, 2 weeks later, we decided to repaint our faded brown front door. Sarah picked out a bright crimson. It'll pop against the tan siding, she said. Asterisk, I didn't argue. You'll learn not to challenge. Someone who can field strip an M4 rifle in under 60 seconds? Asterisk, the red door looked incredible. What we didn't know? It would set off the HOA equivalent of a thermonuclear meltdown? Asterisk, at 6 a.m. the next morning. Our doorbell rang like an alarm. I opened the door in my pajamas to find Richard in a self-styled uniform, tactical pants, shirt with epaulets, HOA badge, gun at his hip, and a woman holding a clipboard. Asterisk, Mr. Johnson, your house is in violation of Covenant Section 8, paragraph 12. Paint colors must match the approved earth tone palette. That red door must be repainted in 24 hours. $500 fine. Additional daily penalties. Asterisk, Sarah came downstairs in uniform multicam pants, tan tee, hair in a bun. She'd barely slept after night training. Asterisk, ma'am, Richard said, clearly flustered. Military cosplay doesn't exempt you from the rules. Big mistake. Sarah, cool and controlled, asked to see the rule. Richard pointed to the covenant book. Asterisk, Sarah flipped to the section and read aloud. Paint must maintain harmony with the natural environment. No mention of red, no mandatory palette. Asterisk, the palette's on page 94, he growled. No red there. Asterisk, it says recommended colors, not required. The word must doesn't appear. Asterisk, Karen, the secretary whispered. She's technically right. Asterisk, in Paradise Pines, Richard snapped, resting his hand on his gun. I'm the law. That door changes, or there'll be consequences. Asterisk, later I told Sarah, maybe we should just repaint. Put his hand on a gun over paint. She. When the HOA president rested his hand on his holstered gun, his face flushed and fingers twitching, Captain Rodriguez's posture shifted, subtle, alert. Is there a problem here, Lieutenant Johnson? He asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. Asterisk, Sarah, standing tall and composed, answered evenly. Mr. Wellington was expressing his concerns about our lawn mowing schedule, reminding me of his authority by gesturing to his firearm. Asterisk, the way she worded it, left the threat hanging in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Richard quickly withdrew his hand from the holster. That's not what I was doing, he sputtered. Asterisk, Captain Rodriguez's face tightened just slightly. Sir, were you just threatening a U.S. Army officer with a firearm? Over lawn maintenance? Richard backed up instinctively. Of course not. It's a habit from my law enforcement days. Sarah smiled coolly. Richard is a former traffic enforcement officer, now president of our HOA. Very committed. The emphasis made Richard visibly uncomfortable. Karen Peterson tugged his sleeve. Richard, maybe we continue this later, she suggested loudly. He nodded stiffly. I'll leave the violation notice, Lieutenant. We'll discuss terms later. He paused. And I expect that lawn corrected by sundown. As Richard's SUV disappeared around the corner, Captain Rodriguez raised an eyebrow at Sarah. That's the HOA terrorist you've been telling us about? The one bullying half your block? Sarah nodded. Former meter maid. Now, he's playing gunslinger. Over paint swatches and hedge heights. Rodriguez shook his head, and he pulled that stunt on a Delta operator. Guy's suicidal. No offense, sir, but your wife is one of the best CQC specialists I've seen. He's lucky he's still upright. Desk butt. Sarah knew humiliation wouldn't stop Richard. It would only make him more dangerous. The next morning. 5 new violation notices arrived. An improperly coiled garden hose, $50 fine. Mailbox height off by less than an inch, $75 fine. American flag angled incorrectly, $1,000 fine. Over $4,000 in citations, with threats of property liens. That evening, at 7 p.m., a knock on the door. A nervous woman glanced over her shoulder. I'm Linda Wellington, Richard's wife. May I come in? I don't want anyone seeing me here. We let her in. Sarah offered tea. Linda sat on edge. I'm sorry about Richard. He wasn't always like this. Losing his job, he felt powerless. The HOA presidency gave him control again. But now, he's obsessed, paranoid, aggressive. Her voice dropped to a whisper. After yesterday, he was up all night researching. He thinks you're conspiring against him. He called emergency board meetings. They're plotting something, but they shut me out. She pressed a USB into Sarah's hand. Financial records. Real ones, and recordings. I think he's planning. Something dangerous. Can't watch it happen. But please, don't tell him I gave it to you. Sarah plugged in the drive. The files were damning. Embezzlement, fraudulent landscaping companies, payments routed to Richard's personal accounts. Recordings revealed board meetings where Richard and his allies discussed targeting and intimidating residents. One chilling quote from that morning. Military types think they're above the rules. We show them what happens when you defy the HOA. Maybe a little accident happens. Brake fluid leak. Nothing fatal. It's just educational. Sarah's face was unreadable. But I knew that expression. Richard had crossed the line. Time to accelerate the timeline, she said, dialing a number. Emily, it's go time. Within hours, our living room transformed into a war room. Sarah's civilian task force assembled, Emily Chen, lawyer, James Wilson, surveillance expert, Frank Thompson, retired judge, and 3 harassed neighbors, based. On what we've seen, we move now, Sarah declared, passing out files. Richard's spiraling, that makes him dangerous. Frank reviewed the financials. This is classic embezzlement. You could have him arrested tomorrow. Emily shook her head. We need more. Linda's evidence could be dismissed. We need Richard. Caught in the act is when Sarah introduced Operation Freedom Pines, a full-scale precision takedown. Sarah always reminded us of a saying from her time in special operations. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. We'll move carefully and catch them red-handed. The morning of our carefully orchestrated wellness check arrived. Our house had been transformed into a fortress of surveillance. Sarah's team had installed discrete cameras across every entry point, inside and out. Nothing would be missed. Emily had already prepared the legal framework and contacted trusted officers. Outside of Richard's circle of influence, Frank secured a verbal agreement with a judge for emergency warrants pending visual confirmation. I built a secure cloud system to immediately upload all footage, ensuring no amount of sabotage could bury the truth. Asterisk at exactly 10 a.m., Sarah. And I walked out the front door, knowing full well the unmarked surveillance car across the street would see us leave. What they didn't know was that moments later, we slipped back in through our neighbor's yard and quietly entered the basement, now a makeshift operations center. Asterisk. At 11:17 a.m., we watched the feed as Detective Morris pulled up with 2 uniformed deputies. They knocked on the front door half-heartedly before Maurice produced a master key legally obtained. As we later confirmed and let them in. Asterisk wellness check, he called, but the true motive was quickly apparent. This wasn't concern. For our well-being, it was a targeted raid. Asterisk checked the nightstand in the master bedroom. Asterisk, these were not the actions of concerned officers. They were searching specific hiding spots. When a deputy started toward the kitchen, Morris snapped, Asterisk, forget that. Focus on planting, finding the evidence where I said. Then we saw it. Morris retrieved a small bag from his coat and handed it to a deputy. Put this in the bedroom drawer. Make it look like they tried to hide it, he instructed. Asterisk, Senator Williams wants this to stick. Once we charge her with drug possession, her military career is over and the lawsuit collapses. One deputy hesitated. Sir, these people are military. This doesn't feel right. Maurice shrugged coldly. Heroes or headaches, it doesn't matter. Williams wants the land deal, and Richard delivers votes. Asterisk, the moment they left, Sarah contacted Captain Rodriguez. Military police arrived within minutes, carefully preserving every planted item without smudging fingerprints. Emily filed emergency motions, and by nightfall, federal agents arrested Maurice. The deputies turned on him almost instantly, testifying. In exchange for leniency, asterisk simultaneously, the FBI raided Senator Williams' office and Richard's estate. What they discovered unraveled a multi-million-dollar conspiracy. HOA funds had been diverted to finance campaign war chests, line pockets, and grease bureaucratic wheels. The real purpose of the strict HOA rules? Drive down property values to force homeowners out? Paradise Pines was built with subpar materials. Covered up by falsified safety and environmental reports, under the Williams family's shady development companies. Asterisk the next day. News exploded across Florida and then the nation. Asterisk state. Senator and HOA president arrested in sweeping fraud investigation. Asterisk satellite trucks crowded our street. Porters knocked on doors. We became reluctant heroes. Asterisk when a journalist asked Sarah how she pulled it off. She simply said, Asterisk, same principles as military intelligence, find the weak spots, gather proof, execute a clean operation. The only difference? Usually I'm doing it in places more dangerous than a Florida subdivision. Asterisk, in the following weeks, Paradise Pines began to heal. With Richard and his cronies facing federal charges, an emergency HOA election was held. Frank Thompson, our steady retired judge, was unanimously elected president. Emily became legal counsel. James Wilson, a retired accountant, took the role of treasurer. Asterisk their first order of business, a full audit. It discovered over 150 HOA. Rules had never been legally ratified by homeowners. Asterisk Frank stood at the first general meeting and declared, Asterisk from garden hose angles to front door colors, none of it was enforceable. We're throwing it all out. Asterisk the new HOA charter was just 10 pages long, focused on safety, respect, and reasonable upkeep, not authoritarian control. Asterisk as the dust settled, news of the poor construction raised concern. But Sarah acted fast. She contacted former colleagues. At the Army Corps of Engineers, they volunteered to inspect every home for structural and environmental issues. Asterisk about 30% of homes had serious problems. Emily led a class action lawsuit against the Williams development firms. The result? Full repairs for affected homes, plus a community trust fund for long-term maintenance. Asterisk at its core, Emily said during the settlement announcement. Asterisk this neighborhood wasn't just ruled by a tyrant, it was built on lies. But today, We're rebuilding it for real. Asterisk Richard, ever defiant, claimed he was the victim of a military coup. But as Senator Williams cut a deal to reduce her sentence by implicating him, and Detective Morris laid out years of corruption, his bravado collapsed. Asterisk, the final blow came from an unlikely source, Curran Peterson, the HOA secretary. It turns out she had kept detailed records of every shady move Richard made just in case. Her files sealed his fate. Asterisk, 6 months later, Richard Wellington was convicted on 37 charges. Asterisk, embezzlement, illegal surveillance, fraud, obstruction of justice. The most damning, attempting to frame an active military officer. Asterisk, the judge sentenced him to 18 years. His assets were seized to fund Paradise Pines renewal, including the land his mansion once stood on, which now blossomed as a community garden. Asterisk, a year to the day after the infamous lawn flag argument, the neighborhood looked nothing like the place we once feared. Houses were repaired. Children played where surveillance cameras once loomed. Asterisk, on our porch, still proudly painted red. Sarah watched the street with a quiet smile. Asterisk, I've never seen a more complete victory, she said. Most missions end without closure. This changed lives. Frank walked up carrying a slim binder. Fresh off the press, he grinned. The new Paradise Pines Community Guidelines. Page 1 held just a single bold statement. Mutual respect is the only rule that matters. Asterisk, sure, there were a few practical items, noise levels, safety standards, but nothing about grass height or mailbox shapes. Asterisk, across the street, a new family moved in. Frank greeted them warmly and pointed toward our home. They looked over, noticing our red door, and waved. Asterisk, Sarah smiled. He's telling them the story, I bet, about how the HOA president pulled a gun on his neighbor. Not realizing she was Delta Force, I slipped an arm around her. Most people write angry letters, or maybe go to small claims court. You took down a corrupt senator? Asterisk, she laughed softly. Go big or go home. Or in this case, go big to protect our home. Asterisk, as the sun set behind our rebuilt neighborhood, Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked the message and chuckled. Asterisk, guess what? The FBI just added our operation to their internal corruption training modules. They're calling it Operation Red Door. Asterisk, we both laughed. It's fitting, really. It's what started as a petty dispute. Overpaint had uncovered corruption that could have festered for years. Asterisk. All because one man pointed a gun at the wrong woman. Asterisk, a woman trained to dismantle empires, whether they exist in war zones or in cul-de-sacs built on greed.